If you're a parent, teacher, or school leader, and you're sick and tired of the frustration, anger, and unfair treatment of children at high risk in our public schools, then perhaps it's time for all of us to do something about it. In this podcast, Dr. Amitra Berry brings you tips, tools, strategies, and tactics to build successful solutions while touching, moving, and inspiring all of us to transform our schools so that every child thrives. Here's your host, Dr. Berry.
Mae Jemison, the first Black woman astronaut, said, "Don't let anyone rob you of your imagination, your creativity, or your curiosity. It's your place in the world. It's your life. Go on and do all you can with it and make it the life you want to live." Hey there, Equity Warriors. Thanks for joining me today on the 3E podcast. It's been a few weeks. Life has been happening. And sometimes when life happens, you have to take a step back and reflect. More about that. First, I want to give a big giant shout out to Los Angeles Unified's Black Student Achievement Plan, the BSAP team. You all are amazing. I had the wonderful opportunity of doing a keynote there earlier this week. Book signing, just good stuff, good people, good content, doing things to elevate the achievement of Black students in LA Unified. And if you all don't have something akin to their BSAP, check it out on LAUSD's website. I don't have the URL in my head, but you can find it. LAUSD, Black Student Achievement Plan. Not too hard. And I've been telling you all for several episodes that there was something coming. There was something coming. I had news. Today's the day. This is episode 100. So listen all the way to the end. I want to talk a little bit today about the 3E podcast. We have been at it, as I said, it's 100 episodes with this one. And over time, I have had challenges to my imagination, my curiosity, some pushbacks sometimes to what I want to say. And so when life happens, you take a step back and you reflect. The first episode of this podcast aired in October 2022. It's hard for me. As I looked at that date, it was just sort of mind-boggling to me that A, I could do 100 episodes, B, that I would last this long, and that I would continue to have something to say. But people who know me know it's hard to make me shut up when I am passionate about something. We have talked about so many things related to equity in education. We've talked about what's happening in our schools in terms of curriculum, book bans, marginalized students being further marginalized. We've talked about teaching hard history. We have run the gamut, including talking about the politics of education. I've spent quite a bit of time in the last, I didn't count, a lot of episodes, probably since the mid-60s, maybe episodes somewhere around episode 60 to today. So about 40 episodes talking about the politics, what's happening in our schools that has nothing to do with curriculum and instruction, nothing to do with teaching and learning, and everything to do about people's political agendas and further marginalizing the children who have historically been left behind, ignored, oppressed, marginalized. How many more adjectives can I get there? But over that time, over these last 99 episodes, there's one other thing we've done. I have had the opportunity, and it just, as I was thinking about the LA keynote, the opportunity to use more colorful language in this platform than I can ever use when I'm standing in front of a school system talking. So my G-rated language gets challenged when I'm face-to-face. You will continue to hear me unfiltered, unadulterated, the things I really want to say, and the way I really want to say them, the way I am able to say them here, that I could not do if I were restrained by an employer or an agency, entity that had some means of either making me filter my language or refusing to support this podcast if I did not filter my language. So what you get here is always going to be the real me. I wanted to start this podcast because there were some things I think needed to be said. No, a friend of mine would tell me or say to me, do you think or do you know? There were some things I knew needed to be said. And I also knew that the only way I could say it to as many people as possible was through a medium other than the one-off workshops that I do on my own. Over time, this podcast has grown to serve equity warriors worldwide. We have a global community here, folks. The majority of the audience, actually it's roughly about 45% of the audience, is based in the United States. And those numbers always surprise me as I look at the list of countries where people are tuning into this podcast: Canada, the UK, Australia, Germany, Ireland, the Philippines, New Zealand, Israel, India, the Netherlands, Belgium, France, Italy, Finland, Singapore. And the list goes on. Not so much surprised by Canada and the UK, maybe even not surprised by Australia, English-speaking countries. But it was seeing those metrics that made me recognize that and start to look at how children of color are marginalized around the world. And beyond just children of color, I've had feedback about how the message relates and resonates with children who and adults, for children, but by adults who are members of the LGBTQ community and the children in that community that are in our schools. It's important to me that this message continues, that this message is spread, and that we continue to elevate the voices of people of cultural and linguistic diversity, people of ethnic diversity, particularly those, as you always hear me say, who are of color and who are marginalized in our school systems. So what does this mean? And why am I in this reflective mode? As I have hosted this podcast, I have been the recipient of messages of hate. You see, there are some people who don't want my voice and the voices of others like me to be shared. There are people, as you know from listening to various episodes, there are people who don't want our children to be successful, that don't want our children to be educated. And those of you who've heard me speak in person have heard me tell a story about a certain person that I worked with when I was teaching in my classroom. And just what it was, they believed our students, all of whom were Black or Latina or Southeast Asian, what they felt about them and how that deep-seated hatred for who our children were made its way into classroom practices, how it made its way into budgeting, impacting the instruction our children could receive. Because you see, There are people in this world who think that the only thing our children are good for, our children of color, that the only thing that they are good for is menial labor, cleaning, the work that none of us wants to do. And at the same time, these are the same people who either quietly or covertly, and sometimes, well, the ones not in education, quite openly, will say that these people don't belong in this country. And the only people, my opinion, keep in mind, most of us are immigrants at some level or another. This country belonged to the people of the First Nation, the Indigenous Americans, the hundreds of tribes of Indigenous Americans who were here before white men ever set foot on this land we call America. Some of us, people like me, our ancestors came here against their will. We didn't ask to come, but we're here. And so there is a large community of people who will say to us, go back to where you came from. But we are here, and our children are here. And because they are here, we are responsible for providing them an education that will allow them to become whomever they want to be. I opened with the words of Mae Jemison, not only because those words inspire me, but because there's a once upon a time little black girl who became an astronaut. It's an amazing accomplishment. And who's to say right now, well, it's summer, so maybe not right now, but come fall, depending on where you're teaching, you won't have a future Mae Jemison in your classroom. But I digress. Where was I? What have I learned? I think that reflection is a tremendously powerful tool. And in the book, my book that is slated to come out this fall, Equitable Instructional Practices for Culturally and Linguistically Diverse Learners, that book will be available from Teacher Created Materials. Contact your this is not an ad, but contact your Teacher Created Materials representative today to get an order in advance. It'll, of course, will be available on every major reseller here in the U.S., Amazon, Barnes & Noble, I guess Amazon internationally. But a big piece of that, the writing in that book, is about reflecting at every step of the way. Reflecting not only on how a lesson went, but reflecting on the language you use in the classroom, reflecting on what your classroom looks like, reflecting on how open and receiving and welcoming your classroom is, how psychologically safe your classroom is for every single child. And as educators, it is important for us to reflect. And that's why, or part of the why, as I took this 3-week leave from the podcast, I spent a lot of time in reflection. Where was it that I wanted this podcast to go? Because to be honest with you, there was a point in time where I just said, I'm done. I'm done. The attacks on social media, the attacks in person, when I would show up to speak to a group of educators, the fear when I left a site where members of the community, not the school community, outside agitators, I was afraid to go back to my hotel, driving around town to make sure there was no one following me. And that gets to be a heavy burden. It's hard. It's scary. And it's hard. So to every single one of you out there who has ever stood up and said what needed to be said in spite of a fear of retribution, at risk of your own personal safety, I want to thank you. I want to thank you as a fellow equity warrior. I want to thank you as an educator. I want to thank you as someone who was once a little black girl that needed people to stand up for her and her rights. Hey there, Equity Warriors. I want to take a quick moment to share something exciting with you. You know how passionate I am about equity in education, right? Well, I've created a special space, a safe space, where we can dive even deeper into these crucial topics. It's our Patreon channel, and I'd love for you to join me there. Here's why it's so awesome. As a Patreon subscriber, you'll get access to exclusive content that I will not share anywhere else. I'm talking additional insights, workshops like you would get in regular professional learning sessions, resources that can really amplify your impact in education. But it's more than just extra content. By subscribing, you are directly supporting our mission. You're helping to create more valuable discussions and resources that you've come to love. You're part of the change we're making in educational systems. And let me tell you, our Patreon community, it is something special. It's a place where passionate educators and advocates can come together, share ideas, and drive real change. So if you're ready to take your commitment to educational equity to the next level, I'd be thrilled to have you join me. Just head over to patreon.com/3E podcast. That's patreon.com/3E podcast. Remember, your support means the world to me, and it helps me continue this important work. Together, we can create the educational system all our students deserve. Thanks for considering, and now let's get back to the episode. I look at our audience, the metrics that show where people are listening, and I worry that my message is not as cleanly connected and relevant to them as it could be. I want to make sure, whether you're listening in the Netherlands or Germany or Singapore, that the messages that we provide connect to you and the children that you serve. So I need your help. Let's just put it that way. If we're going to continue to promote educational equity internationally, I need your help. Over these last 3 weeks, as I reflected and planned and scratched and started planning all over again, I had to keep thinking, where are we going? What's the future of the 3E podcast? Now, I told you there was going to be big news. And oddly enough, that period of reflection allowed for the big news to not be just big, but better. A better way to serve each and every one of you. So I have 2 invitations for you. Here's one, and that is the continuation of my mission, not only to serve diverse learners, children of color, through you, the educators who take care of them every single day, but to elevate your voices, particularly voices of color and voices of those who serve children of color around the world. I need you. I need your help. I want to hear from you. So if you are within the sound of my voice and you are an educator of color or an educator committed to being an ally to children of color, and when I say an ally, I mean somebody who's willing to stake their reputation, their job, their physical safety to make sure that our children get what they need. If you're that person and you have a story to share or you have some insights, I want you to join me on the show. If you're an educator who is a member of the LGBTQ, did I get my initials right? LGBTQ community with a story to share, or insights on how to serve children in your community. I want to hear from you too. I want to amplify your voices. I want us to inspire change together. Don't even think about it. Look down in the notes and find the link to contact me. You can also contact me. I'm going to give you my 2. I said big news. That's big news. That's different. That's a shift, right? You hear from me all the time. Occasionally, I'll bring somebody on the show and we have a wonderful conversation. I absolutely love the conversations that I've been able to have with others that are out there doing the work that impacts our children. But I want you to hear from them more directly, because as much as I would like to think I'm a fairly intelligent person, I don't know everything. Let's elevate some more voices. Contact me. Maybe it's not you who wants to be on the show, but maybe you know somebody who should be on the show. Contact me, copy them. See, sometimes you got to sneak a little bit to get what you want. That's 1. Here's 2. Y'all know every time you tune in, you are part of something bigger. You are part of a movement to reshape education. And so today I'm going to do something I've never done before. I'm going to ask you to take that impact to the next level. So maybe coming on the show isn't your jam. Maybe you don't know anybody who can come on the show, and that's okay. I always say, stay in your lane. I have to remind myself, stay in your lane. But you can make a huge difference, and here's how. First, if you have not already done so, hit the subscribe button. It's free, it's easy, and I promise you, I am not going to bombard you with messages. I won't have your email unless you decide to give it to me somehow. And right now, I don't put out a newsletter, so you're safe, right? I'm not going to do anything to you. It's free, it's easy. Hit the subscribe button, and it matters more than you can possibly know. Metrics. Second, if you found value in today's conversation, share this message. If you have found value in prior episodes of the podcast, share them. Spread the word to your friends, your colleagues, to anyone you know who cares about education. Third, and this is the big one, please consider becoming a supporter of the 3E podcast. Your small monthly contribution is truly rocket fuel for this mission. With your support, we can amplify our voices. We can amplify these crucial conversations. We can expand our global and domestic audience and produce more content that you want to hear. When we work together, we're not just talking about change, we're making it happen. So here's what I'm asking. Find the 3E podcast, the Educational Equity Emancipation Podcast. It'll have the same logo as wherever it is you're listening on whatever platform you're on, and subscribe to the show, because every download there, and only there, directly supports this work. Remember, you're not just a listener. You're a change maker. You're an equity warrior. You have the power to change the things we can no longer accept. So join our community, be part of the change, support the 3E podcast today in any way you can. Thank you for staying with me. Thank you for listening, and I'll catch you on the next episode.